Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the December Cabinet meeting. My name is Councillor Millie Earl. I'm the leader of BCP Council, and I'll be chairing this meeting today. I'd like to welcome members of the public who have given up their time to be with us, and of course to Cabinet members and councillors, and of course to officers who are in the room with us today and online. First of all, I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who's going to give us the housekeeping for today's meeting.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Item 2 is declarations. Sorry, item 1 is apologies. We've had apologies from Councillor Kieran Wilson and Councillor Mike Cox. However, Councillor Cox has joined us online, which means he can present his paper, but he won't be able to propose or second or vote on the items at today's Cabinet. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. I haven't had any received, but if any do come up, then please do declare them when we get to those items. Agenda item 3 is the confirmation of minutes. That is of the last Cabinet meeting on the 26th of November. Can I have a proposer for this item, please?
Happy to propose, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. And someone to second?
Happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Is there agreement that everything is fine with those minutes? Seeing nods. Thank you. Agenda item 4 is public issues. There have been no petitions on this occasion, but there are 2 statements and 3 questions submitted from members of the public relating to agenda item 11, which is the improving biodiversity in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. The 3 questions are from a Mr. Tony Hyde, but I don't think Mr. Hyde is present today. So I'm going to ask that Sarah reads his questions, please.
Thank you. Question 1 from Tony Hyde in relation to agenda item 11. Can the Cabinet explain the basis on which it has assessed and selected the 3 council-owned sites, Erlin Farm, Millams Mead and Solent Meads, given that Solent Meads currently generates guaranteed rental income from tenants, while Erlin Farm and Millams Meads generate no income? Furthermore, can the Cabinet clarify how it has taken account of the projected annual value of biodiversity net gain credits at each site, given that no assessments have yet been undertaken? That's question 1.
Thank you, and I think Councillor Hadley is going to give a response for that one.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. The Council have taken advice from the habitat banking experts Finance Earth, and they analysed some of our suitable green spaces. The 3 sites were chosen based on the potential to uplift the biodiversity of these sites and the timing of expiry of the lease in the case of parts of the Solent Mead site. The detail of the assessments, including estimated value of the biodiversity net gain credits, are in the appendices to the Cabinet report under item 11.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. And on to Mr. Hyde's second question, please.
Thank you. So question 2, in relationship to Solent Meads golf course, would it not have been better governance to inform the existing tenant that their lease would expire in 2026 and they would have to apply for a new lease through an open tender process rather than simply informing them that their lease would not be renewed? How does the Council justify this approach in terms of fairness, transparency and continuity of income for the Council?
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you for your question. I think it would have been reasonable for a tenant to know when their lease would be expiring, but the tenant was informed of this in a meeting with officers, and as a consequence he chose to raise a petition sharing some quite inaccurate information. Under public sector procurement rules, we are obliged to retender the opportunity at a reasonable frequency, and this provides fairness and transparency to all. it is open to the existing tenant to reapply.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. We have a question from another question from Mr. Hyde. Sarah?
Thank you. Question 3. Presently, what percentage of income from Solent Meads tenant is currently reinvested in Solent Meads, and will the tenant revenue be counted towards or offset BNG?
Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Income from Solent Mead Golf contributes to the overall council income and is not ring-fenced or allocated for a specific use, in common with many other tenancies of its type. The income from the golf course could not count towards biodiversity net gain.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. So that concludes our questions for today's meeting, but we do have 2 statements. One is from Abigail McMullen and another from Matt Stewart. So Abigail, would you like to come up, please, and read your question? Read your statement.
Hello, my name is Abigail McMullen and I speak as the chair of Hengistbury and Wick Residents Association, known as HENRA. We represent 579 members who have a strong interest in the future of Solent Meads Golf Course as a vital community facility. Residents have experienced significant change in recent years. In uncertain times, people value places that support well-being, connection and continuity. Solent Meads is one such place and must remain a community-focused asset. The course provides safe, inclusive and affordable outdoor recreation for older people, disabled residents, learners and families, many of whom have no realistic alternatives. It's flat, well-drained, par 3 layout, has high local usage and all-round accessibility. And continued access for walkers makes it unique to the area. Environmental improvements and community use can coexist. Any tender process must protect the course's core purpose, which is to serve the community. We urge the Council to ensure future arrangements safeguard accessibility, affordability and inclusivity, working constructively with residents to achieve outcomes that benefit all. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you, Abby. And another statement we've got from Matt Stewart. Matt, would you like to come up and read your statement?
Good morning, Chair, Cabinet. My name is Matthew Stewart. I speak as the Director of Golf Wall Limited, one of 3 of us. The leaseholder at Solent Meads Golf for over 22 years and administrator of the petition against the closure of the golf course. When we were informed in November that there would be no more golf at Solent Meads, we were outraged on behalf of the people who use the facility. I started a petition which now has over 8,000 signatures. Solent Meads is not just a golf course, it is a social hub and is good for well-being of the community and further afield. I cannot emphasise strongly enough how important the golf is at Solent Meads, and I am pleased that due to the strong opposition from residents and the representation of our local councillors, that golf is now back on the table, and I ask the Cabinet members to support the retendering of the site so that golf may continue and flourish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is recommendations from overview and scrutiny committees that are not otherwise on the agenda. I can see we've got a few chairs in the room. Can I see if anyone has any to give to this meeting? No? Okay, thank you, councillors. So because of the public interest in items 10 and 11 on today's agenda, I've decided to move these two items forward. Therefore, the next item we will do is number 10, which is about the statutory duty to biodiversity, and then we'll move on to agenda item 11. So Councillor Hadley will be presenting and proposing this item. Can I see if there's someone to second this one, please?
So I'm quite happy to second that. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Over to you, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. So access to nature is of vital importance to health and well-being for our communities, as actually one of the statements just highlighted. We have a duty following the Environment Act 2021 to report on our biodiversity and to do what we can. Back in 2019, we declared a climate and ecological emergency. The biodiversity in the UK is one of the world's most depleted countries, and the Environment Act seeks to reverse that decline. In paragraph 6, it highlights that BCP contributes to the national biodiversity goals and targets, which are by 2030 to halt the decline in species abundance and to protect 30% of the UK land for nature. By 2042, to increase species abundance by at least 10% from 2030, and to reduce the risk of species extinction, and to restore 3/4 of our terrestrial and freshwater protected sites to a favourable condition, securing their wildlife value for the long term. This is where the concept of biodiversity net gain comes from, and the obligations through the planning process to ideally improve biodiversity on development sites, or then in the local area, or then elsewhere. As the report highlights, there's 16 biodiversity gain plans been approved through the planning process. Of those, 2 have achieved their 10% net gain on the actual site of the development. The other 14 have been off-site through purchasing units to improve those nature habitats. These off-site units mean that 2.4 hectares of habitat, 2.4 habitat units have been bought and 0.22 hedgerow units. They're different values for the different types of habitat that you're creating. £187,000 has been raised within BCP, but none of that has actually been spent within BCP. Most of it has actually been spent in our neighbouring areas, 97% of that in our neighbouring areas. And nationally, £320 million has been put into habitat restoration since the legislation came in February, since February 24. The benefits for people in that, obviously time spent in contact with nature is a significant well-being gain, and one of the appendices to the report talks about the public health implications of improving nature. A lot of people take great joy from seeing wildlife, and it's really noticeable just in the last couple of years how the number of birds in people's garden have reduced. I've seen an awful lot of comments about the loss of bird life. People are seeing the decline for themselves. Chair, there is a spelling mistake in paragraph 25. It says pool as in swimming pool rather than pool as in the town of Poole. So we need to probably change that. There were some changes made yesterday to the legislation, which looks to exempt small sites, less than 0.2 hectares from the BNG responsibilities. That accounts for 77% of planning applications nationally. Literally, it happened yesterday, and I wasn't able to talk to the officers since then in terms of what the implications for us are. But that does have a change, and it is part of the nature of this is new legislation, and our planning officers are coming to grips with it, and developers are coming to grips with it. I think the other thing to point out is that there are 6 attachments to this report, and one of them is our biodiversity report. And that includes 14 key indicator species. So they're species that, working in partnership with Dorset Council, we've identified things that are important in our local landscape, but also which are indicators for the health of the landscape. And so that includes things like sand lizards, it includes the natterjack toads, and there's a list of 14 for the BCP conurbation that we think are important to try and highlight how we can improve. If we improve nature for those 14, then we improve it for the others. So I think that's all I was going to say for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Are there any councillors who are in the room or online who want to speak on this item? Can't see any indications. Right, over to Cabinet. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Leader. I suppose I ought to say something, being I seconded it. I mean, first of all, I would say that I found this paper a really enjoyable paper, interesting paper to read. It's always nice to see lots of photographs of wildlife in a paper and do a bit of daydreaming about when last time you saw them. I would sort of highlight biodiversity is probably, a lot of people don't quite get what is meant by biodiversity. You know, I have conversation with residents who see a field, a green field and some deer in it, who go, that is biodiversity. But of course, biodiversity is a lot more complicated than that. It's a lot of the small things that you don't see without actually focusing on them. And improving environment for these things that you maybe not notice actually then adds to the biodiversity of the area and allows some of the some of these species which people find more interesting to survive. I'm very happy to support this paper, and I say it was a very interesting and enjoyable paper to read.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. And I would say as well that me and another Cabinet member often exchange photos of birds that we have spotted when we're out and about, because we live in such an amazing area with a very unique habitat.
If I could add, I often wake up to the morning to find a fridge full of moths.
Yes.
But that's part of my life.
I was just, what I wanted to do was draw attention to Appendix 3, which is about, which shows the structure really around not just the corporate strategy and the fact that this council works to a bunch of metrics and a bunch of achievements that we want to do, particularly on place and environment and people and community, but also cast councillors' minds back to the climate and ecological emergency declaration that we made at our very first meeting of BCP Council. Now, what I've seen grow over the last 6 years is really those strategies and policies that are coming together to really take seriously the urban greening responsibility that we have. And for example, my ward, Newtown and Heavlands, has the lowest tree coverage in the whole of the conurbation. And what it means is that we see some of our amazing wildlife like swifts and bats slowly disappear over the years. So I'm really supportive of making sure that we not just meet our statutory duty on biodiversity, but actually that we exceed it and that we make sure that we're using the purchase of credits that developers need to improve our area, to make sure that we're benefiting, that residents are benefiting, but most importantly that nature is benefiting from the development that happens locally. Okay, so, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I just wanted to comment because I don't want to just sort of pass over this report, because although it's about our statutory duty under the Environment Act, I think just when you read through that appendix of the biodiversity report, it's really interesting. And I think we need to remember this is not just another sort of, oh, we've got statutory duty, let's bring the report. This relates right back to the shared vision that we have for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, which we sort of worked on and agreed in 2023, and I'll just read it. It's our shared vision for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole is where people, nature, coast and towns come together in sustainable, safe and healthy communities. And it talks about our place and environment, vibrant places where healthy people and nature flourish with a thriving economy and a healthy natural environment. And so right up front, this council's priorities and vision for the area talks about nature. It talks about a healthy natural environment. So this report, to me, is really key to what we're trying to deliver right from the top of our vision for the area. What I'd like to say is, though, it's really important that as a council we're doing this and we're sort of working on this, but I think it for all individuals actually need to sort of get on board with this and understand what it means. I mean, I've been really fortunate that we've got Camford Sang just near where I live, and I walk my dog there regularly, and I see otters in the river and I see kingfishers flying along the river, and you know, that's, to me, that just, you know, changes your day when you've seen things like that. And it's really important for people's sort of mental health and well-being. But also, you know, I live in a suburban area in a semi-detached house with a fairly small front garden. Most of my neighbours' driveways are all concreted over with cars parked on them. I'm one of the few who's got only a small bit of front garden on there. But to be honest, this year, partly I didn't get around to sort of doing stuff, and it started to grow a bit more. And I thought, actually, let's just let it go a bit wild this year, and I did. And the reward I've had for that was I've seen a large male stag beetle there, which I did then notify because it's a notifiable species in decline. And a hummingbird hawk moth was on one of my bushes in my front garden. And this is only sort of about five meters long, my front garden. And so just from that, I think if all individuals thought about things when they're thinking about tarmacking over their front gardens or getting rid of grass and putting in astroturf and those sorts of things, and just thought the rewards you can get for your own contribution to nature, to me, is immeasurable. So I think it's important that we're doing it as a council, but it's important that people think about it, understand it, and get on board with doing it as well.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Andy, Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, just a couple of points, and actually a couple of them were being made by David, so I'll skip through that. But I just wanted to point out, well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Councillor Hadley for his continued work on the environment and BNG and everything that we value about the area we live in. He's an ardent campaigner, and I'm full of admiration for the work he does on this. I'd like to point out that the United Kingdom is one of the most nature depleted countries in Europe. In fact, I think it's probably one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. And BCP's commitment to BNG, to nature recovery, to our natural environment is to be applauded. And we have all sorts of strategies: nature recovery, urban forest strategy. I think again, praise to the council officers and all those councillors involved in that process. I think it would be. I'd like to mention where I represent, because I'm going to make it sound like a bit of a wildlife wonderland, but actually it is, because I'm always being sent pictures by residents who have, when they take photographs of deer walking down the road, and they do, and I've seen it, or foxes down the road, or badgers in the woodland, we've got some otters over there as well. In fact, I was out in a place called Knee Meadows, which I know Councillor Hadley will be familiar with, looking for signs of with a local nature expert, looking for signs of otters, and he's put cameras around, so we have lots of footage of the existence of otters in and out of Knee Meadows and other parts of the area. And I think I may have used this figure before, but in particularly along the coastline and in other woodland, we have 13 out of the 23 bat species in the country. So 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I would never have considered myself to be an eco warrior, but I feel I am now. Never too late. So I just wanted to make those points, and just also a little bit of a reminder that although we have a big focus on this, one of the big areas that is a problem is the rivers, River Avon, the River Stour, and the levels of phosphates and nitrates. So I don't think we should forget that is a significant problem, which needs to be dealt with by others. So, but yeah, that's it. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. And it's not too late to add a new bird table or some other handy wildlife kit to your Christmas list this year. Okay, so we're going to move to a vote now. So this is for us to approve. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hadley. Please do sum up.
Thank you, Leader. Thank everyone for their contribution. I think a couple of things I'd point out. One is that BCP, the diagram that you shared, is actually really important, because we've come up with strategies for all sorts of aspects of how we try and deal this together. And I do have to thank the officers, particularly Martin Whitchurch, in terms of his vision, his understanding, and he gets national praise for that. And we are, BCP is the first nature towns collectively the first nature towns in the country, in recognition of that work and that thinking at landscape scale of what we do, what we need to do. And Councillor Martin just mentioned phosphates and nitrates in the rivers, and that's from two sources. It's from farmland and it's from sewage processing. And that means, we have to be interested in what happens in Pewsey in North Wiltshire and in North Dorset. Stour Head is obviously where the Stour starts. It's clues in the name. And so we have to work with partners, with neighbours across a very wide landscape in terms of things like the quality of the water in the river. And I think as well the natural space. One of the reasons that the UK is so nature depleted is because there's very little natural about the natural space. It's all managed in some way, and we can manage it for good or we can manage it for bad. And unfortunately, managing it just for profit has sort of been the focus for a lot of this, and that's part of why we've got some of those problems with things like water quality. Managing the spaces we can for the benefit of nature and people and the environment is what these strategies are all about and trying to achieve. Councillor Brown made really useful reference, I think, to what you can do in your own gardens, and a bit untidy is actually really good for nature. If you want to see hedgehogs, they need piles of leaves to be left alone. If you want to see other items, then you can create a little pocket of space, and nature will come. Nature will find it very quickly. If you dig a pond, you'll get pond life in it very quickly. So I think anything that individuals can do is all to the good, and it is about if you create some opportunities for nature, it will reward you. And I was at someone else's house, and there was some seed heads that had been left, and there was a whole load of goldfinches on them. And they just come and find it. And I say, leave stuff a bit untidy sometimes is actually the best way to help nature out. Deer were mentioned several times. Deer, actually, we have quite a few non-native deer species, and they're really destructive. And again, that's about balance. Trying to make sure that we are creating spaces that are that enable a different species to survive, but also deer will crop off almost everything. It's a bit like sheep in the uplands, and that's the problem with a lot of the wild spaces. It would be forest, but it's nibbled to death by sheep. And we also have problems, obviously, with our domestic pets, with cats and dogs, and the predation on birds by cats. And the disturbance by dogs, and that's where we need to match responsibility against some of it. So all really good stuff, and thank you for all the contributions.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. So we will take a vote on that one. All those in favour of the recommendations in the report? Thank you very much. That is unanimous. Okay, so following on from that one, we have agenda item 11, which is improving biodiversity in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. So Councillor Hadley is going to be proposing this one. Is there someone who would like to second? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Over to you, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. So this comes from the requirements around biodiversity and improving biodiversity net gain, which is under planning law, our statutory duties. And we had a vote back in December, I think it was, to continue to work on creating an opportunity to try and make sure that some of the money that developers are putting into improving nature, if they can't do it on their own site, is being spent within BCP and improving areas that are available to the public and accessible. So trying to, as I said on the previous item, improve the nature for people, for the environment, and for wildlife. We had a external consultants who are experts in this field helping us. There are a number of other places that have done it, particularly Plymouth is an example where they have created the opportunity to make sure that money gets spent back in the local area as a result of developments elsewhere. And they looked at our available green spaces and said these are 3 sites that potentially could be significantly improved for nature, and we could sell units in biodiversity net gain in order to fund that. And part of the legislation, part of the process, allows for or creates a 30-year safeguard that habitat will not only be improved, but it will be maintained for a 30-year period. So it's about longevity and trying to make sure that that is sustained. The 3 sites we've highlighted are Erlyn Farm, Millamsmead and Solent Meads. And obviously we've had representations particularly about the golf course on Solent Meads. It's not just about the golf course, it is about a wider area of the as you approach Hainsbury Head that is not already protected in other ways that the team have assessed could be improved. Absolutely. We as a cabinet have heard the representations of people about the golf. It was part of the original paper that I saw as in draft that we would be considering continued leisure use, whether golf or whether something else. But you know that we wouldn't be excluding the sorts of activities that are happening there now. But we need to look at how we can improve it. And I suppose part of what we would like to go forward in retendering the opportunity is to look at how we can make sure that we are actually improving the space for nature as well. So exactly the way that Councillor Brown highlights in terms of his front garden, how can we make sure that what we do for leisure for people is compatible with and supports nature. And it's a really sensitive site because it's at the bottom of the River Stour and Avon and the harbour edge. They are originally flood meadows, and it also is. There's a map we've got of sort of how we're trying to improve the whole area, and we've got the coastal strip and we've got the Stour Valley as two areas where we're trying to look at complete landscape scale and go how can we improve along all of those. So that's the intention. There are three recommendations. One is noting our previous decision to sell biodiversity net gain units in principle, and this is now the detail on how we go about that. Second one to approve the improvement of the three sites that have been highlighted: Erlin's Farm, Millamsmead, and Solent Meads outside of the golf course area for future supply of BNG units. And the third one is to look at improving nature as part of the free tendering of the golf and other leisure use for the existing Solent Meads golf area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Right, I'm going to ask if there are any councillors in the room or online who aren't on Cabinet who wish to speak. I have had a request, which is from Councillor Bernadette Nanovo and Councillor Judy Richardson. Councillor Nanovo, would you like to come up and speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Bernadette Nanovo, and this is my co-councillor, Judy Richardson. We represent East Southbourne and Tufton Ward, where Solent Meads is based. And today I will be speaking on behalf of both of us. When we first discussed the subject of Solent Meads, and biodiversity net gain credits being used to fund future improvements, my co-councillor and I said, as long as the golf continues, we won't have a problem. However, it soon became apparent that the golf was at risk, and our opposing voices, while only two to begin with, were soon backed up by the Hengistbury Head Residents Association and by the 8,000 plus people who signed the petition, organised by one of the directors of Golf for All, Matt Stewart, who made a statement earlier. This was an overwhelming response. We also had numerous emails and people stopping us in the street saying, what is happening with Solent Meads? To be honest, we had no idea how popular this facility was until the news broke that Solent Meads Golf could be finished. We quickly realised that our residents love what is on offer at Solent Meads. The course is accessible, short and easy, and a joy to walk around. Perfect for less mobile people and beginners. I have been told that it's not uncommon to see 3 generations playing golf together. Golf teaches young people life skills, manners, numeracy, rules, decision-making, to name but a few. And it serves an important role, especially now when there are no youth services. People who walk their dogs stop off for a coffee and a chat and park for free. Staff who work at St. Catherine's School have been parking there, which has been an important benefit to them, and some of them have contacted me. We want all this to continue. What we need today is for Cabinet to agree that the golf club, which includes the driving range, car park and buildings, will be excluded from the BNG and be retendered as a golf facility. We would also ask that the tender includes a suitably long lease to enable a future leaseholder to invest in this site. Where else would you find such a unique golf facility? Solent Meads is unique, and the tender needs to be carefully thought out to benefit local residents and visitors alike. And I would also like to add that if there's any proposed changes to the golf facility, like removing the driving range for B&G, that ward councillors and residents are consulted and that the matter comes back to Cabinet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Novo. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak on this? I can't see any indications, so I think we will go over to Cabinet. No? I was just going to say a few... Oh, sorry, Councillor Hannah, go ahead.
First of all, can I express appreciation to those residents who've attended this meeting and who've raised questions or made statements, and also to Councillor Novo. As a West Southbourne councillor, I have some sympathy for Councillor Novo's situation, because I've also had representations from my ward residents, and I understand their concerns. I do think it's unfortunate that misunderstandings seem to have arisen as to what our intentions are, with even the suggestion that decisions had been taken that had not been taken. And I want to emphasise that's no reflection on Councillor Hadley. I've got to say, whose work on this overall area of environment, biodiversity, etc., I greatly appreciate, and whose knowledge and expertise far exceeds my own and has my admiration. That said, I'm very pleased that the recommendations exclude the golf course from BNG as such, while looking to improve nature as part of the retendering process. And I do hope that that reassures residents and the ward councillors. If I may, there's just one thing that I would like to double check. The wording in the recommendation refers to Solent Mead outside of the golf course, and there is a plan on page 336 which shows the area, and I just wanted to double check that in the wording outside the golf course or excluding the golf course, that actually means the area that is designated in yellow on that plan, all of that area. I'd be grateful for that reassurance, but otherwise very happy to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. I'm sure Councillor Hadley will address that in his summing up. Anyone else wishing to speak on this? So I was going to mention Millam's Mead, which is actually one of my absolute favourite places to visit in the conurbation. If anyone hasn't been there, I would recommend taking your binoculars and going and having a good look at the nature that's down there. But what I'm really glad about is that what this protection does, you know, by allocating it to credits, it actually protects that site for 30 years. And that for me is just a joy to hear, because it is such an important site to me. We know we have a government which is absolutely intent on building. In fact, we saw the reforms yesterday that strip more power away from local authorities. We have to face the reality that if we are not able to protect these sites, who knows if the government will come in and take powers away from us to be able to build on them. So I'm just really glad that Millam's Mead, Erlin Farm and a bit of Solent Meads is protected for at least 30 years. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this one? No? Councillor Hadley, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so if I start in a fairly random fashion, so in terms of my understanding of the yellow on that chart is that is the area that is let in terms of the golf and associated areas. And part of that is, you know, in order to put forward space for biodiversity net gain, I think that it wouldn't be compatible to do that for continued use for golf. The ward councillors absolutely hear that we've heard very strongly that the views, as I think Councillor Hannah referred to, that was based on a misunderstanding. We don't have we hadn't made a decision, and as I said, golf was always part of the consideration that it's the existing bit. There was a separate issue about needing to reprocure after a significant time that contract had been let. It needed to go back to competitive tender. The nature of that, we will absolutely involve the ward councillors in that and public consultation, because I think there is something about that. It doesn't have to be exactly as it was, and indeed, we need to go to other people in terms of how would they improve it in terms of the cafe offer, in terms of how that space is used. So I think we need to keep some options open on that. But there's no secret agenda. It's not about that. It is about a landscape. So as I said, we are looking to improve the biodiversity, and quite separately we need to look at reprocuring the leisure opportunity on that site. So that is the intention. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Right, so we will take this one to a vote. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendations in the report, please? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, I'm just going to pause for a couple of moments if members of the public would like to leave. You're welcome to stay though, of course. Right, thank you to those who have spent their time with us this morning at Cabinet. We will now move on to agenda item 6, which is the medium-term financial plan. It will be, well, the update to it. Councillor Cox is going to be presenting this one. I'm going to propose it. Is there someone to second? Councillor Hannah?
Happy to formally second. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cox, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, the report we have before us, the purpose of it is really to ensure that the Council presents a robust and legally balanced budget for 26-27, highlighting the significant uncertainties due to the government's funding formula review and the recent national policy statements. It does update the Council's medium-term financial plan, the impact of the national budget announcements and the existential threat posed by the growing dedicated schools grant deficit, especially the special needs and disability high needs block. So the recommendations to Cabinet acknowledges the ongoing progress to address the funding gap for 26-27, endorses the latest budget and MTFP position. It recognises the significant uncertainty to do with the new funding formula, approves the restricted voluntary redundancy process to deliver savings from service-based restructures, requests additional savings and efficiencies and income proposals and service adjustments to ensure a legally balanced budget, and obviously continues the current local council tax support scheme for 26-27, which is unchanged since April 19. In terms of the current financial position and the challenges, we've in October 2025, the medium-term financial plan update showed a challenging position with £8.2 million funding gap for 26-27. We're even accounting for £12.2 million worth of savings and efficiencies. The Council previously forecast an overspend in 26-27, prompting mitigation measures like expenditure and vacancy freezes. The overview and scrutiny members have been engaged in budget conversations to support proactive engagement and scrutiny, focusing on areas like libraries, youth services, regeneration and public events. And I do want to thank the overview and scrutiny for endorsing this report. In terms of the national policy and funding updates, in November 25, local government finance policy statements confirmed a 3-year settlement, which was welcome, but with new funding primarily for social care and phased in over 3 years. 4 new consolidated grants will replace the previous funding streams, targeting homelessness, children and youth, public health and crisis resilience. And of course, the council tax principles will allow up to 4.99% increase annually, with higher increases only for authorities with below average tax levels, which does include us. In terms of the autumn budget announcements, the introduction of the high value council tax surcharge on properties valued over £2 million from April 28 is being introduced. Unfortunately, none of that funding will be coming our way. It's going straight to the government. The government will take over, however, the day-to-day send funding from April 28. But BCP Council retains responsibility for the accumulated deficits, and we're reckoning that will be, by that stage, circa £300 million. Changes to business rates and national living wage increases and inflation forecasts will also obviously impact future budgets. So in terms of our latest budget and MTF position, the funding gap for 26-27 has increased with ongoing work to refine the MTFP and to develop further savings proposals. The council is forecasting an increased overspend in 25-26, with no resources set aside to cover this, potentially impacting our reserves going forward. There is the pension fund revaluation shows some slight improvements in funding levels, but there is ongoing and back funding contributions are under review. The extended producer responsibility payments for waste managers have increased, positively impacting the MTFP, but service pressures, especially on social care, continue to drive costs higher. The corporate directors and budget holders have been tasked with developing savings proposals with increased tracking through the bi-weekly Cabinet and Corporate Management Board meetings. Transformation and investor save proposals such as home to school transports are being considered actively. An increased voluntary redundancy programme is recommended with criteria ensuring redundancies only occur where savings pay back within 2 years. So just to summarise, the forecasts for BCP's settlements have varied wildly so far, making it virtually impossible to plan ahead. Early indications are that the settlement will be due today, apparently. But as usual, we will need to wait and see. But in the meantime, I'd ask you to agree the recommendations before you. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cox. Right, are there any councillors who would like to speak on this? Councillor Canavan?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things, if I may. One is to point out that the decision by the Overview and Scrutiny Board to support the recommendations was on a majority decision, and I opposed it. And one of the issues for me is that I have continued to press for more information about what options lie behind the current situation that BCP faces. I've been doing that since the first round of the budget scrutiny proposals, and I've done it again since. I suspect people are starting to get slightly annoyed that I keep pressing for this information, but I will continue to press for it, because despite the uncertainty, which I accept, and hopefully that may get some clarification today or tomorrow when people have had time to read it, it seems to me that it's inconceivable in my head that somewhere we are not looking at what those options might be. Now, I can guess what they might be, but my guessing is not quite scientific enough for me to understand what options this council faces. Now, I accept that hopefully after today that might be clearer, and that you might be able to let me know what those options are. But in terms of scrutiny through you, Leader, I can't stress how important it is. I can't stress enough how important it is for this administration to be open about what options it faces. Because with the greatest of respect to Councillor Cox, I do not want to be in a situation again where he says, what are your options? And I simply can't answer the question because I don't have the information that he has. I do not believe that's equitable. So that's why I'm pressing for that information, so that we are all in the same place, that we are all looking at the same options, and that we can all have the same information in order to be party, hopefully, to the same decisions. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this item? Can't see any indications. Over to Cabinet. Also, no indications. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak briefly about one bit of the report which doesn't get a lot of attention. It talks in paragraphs 22 to 26 about the local council tax support scheme, which is not an area that people often sort of look at or talk about, but it is really important to note, as it says in paragraph 24, that there are 21,598 claimants for local council tax support within the BCP area as at last month. That was the count. So when we're looking at budget decisions and council tax decisions, it's really important to note that those who are in the most sort of vulnerable situation financially in terms of sort of changes to council tax are protected and are able to benefit from local council tax support. And it is within our gift to actually change or restrict the access to that, or restrict the benefits from that, in order to sort of make budget savings. And we're not doing that. So paragraph 22 notes that there are no changes are proposed to the local council tax support scheme, which, when we've got the cost of living crisis and people are saying, they can't afford changes to council tax, this is a really important point to make, that we are not restricting access to local council tax support any further. We are not withdrawing the sort of benefits that are available to those most in need from that. And, we are making a decision here and now, because it has to sort of happen a little bit before the budget, that actually that we are, we're not looking at withdrawing from that. So I think that's just, for me, that's a really important point to note, that while it's within our gift to actually, draw back from that, and that we're not doing that, we are sort of still allowing those most in need to access local council tax support. So.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hadley, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, a couple of things. So just reflecting on that £300 million deficit that we're just going to have to fund, which is for SEND, and what that's doing to all of our other services, and particularly the non-statutory ones. It is really actually outrageous in terms of the costs, and these are people, absolutely families, who need support, but to load that onto local taxpayers is just really difficult. And it's great that the government will solve that in April 2028, but the legacy of that is that a lot of what we try and do will have already been destroyed by that point, and I think that's really outrageous. The other thing is and again, Councillor Cox referred to the extended waste having a positive impact. That is a short-term opportunity, because the suppliers will be doing what they can to avoid paying that tax by changing their packaging, and that's the intention of that legislation, is to actually make that change rather than to create an ongoing income for councils. So that's a short-term windfall, I suppose, but actually one that we are needing to use in order to manage all the other changes and uncertainties in the waste streams, which are very significant, and obviously subject to a paper that will be coming a little bit later down today's agenda. But I appreciate that the partly on an annual basis, waste is really difficult, but with all the current waste reforms, there's an awful lot of uncertainty in that, which doesn't help with the overall position. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm not going to say a lot about this because I've got a paper coming up following on from this, all about the dedicated school grant and the high needs expenditure. But I'd just like to highlight and remind something that Councillor Cox did say. He talked about the dedicated schools grant and mentioned that this is the high needs block bit of it. The rest of the dedicated school grant is in balance. That's not where the expenditure is. The expenditure is totally in the high needs block overspend. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you, Chair. Could I express thanks to both Councillor Cox and the Director of Finance for the report and for all the work that's gone into it. And in doing so, could I express sympathy to both of them? Because I think the position that they are in and we are in is incredibly difficult and sadly not helped by the government's policy on this, that and the other, including things like what happened with national insurance last time around. Councillor Hadley has already mentioned the overspend, the deficit. And if my figures are roughly right, if I understand it, the interest that we are due to pay on that deficit, if it were rolled up into the deficit instead, and we did not have to pay it from revenue, then that would actually resolve our entire funding gap and there would not be a budget pressure. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we are not able to simply roll it up and say this is part of the overall SEND problem. The government has said we can set aside the deficit. Why can we not set aside the interest on that deficit as well? And if we end up having to make reductions in services to residents to the tune of the 8.2 million funding gap, then it is that government decision which is responsible for that. The other area where I would place some sympathy is just in the timing of the settlement. We should have known way back what the situation would be. It is unreasonable, in particular to our director, that there is going to end up being some last minute calculations and planning and then budget pressures to be resolved before we actually come to our budget council. That is unreasonable and it's a failure to respect the important work that local government does and the difficulties experienced by directors of finance right across the country. So my genuine sympathy to both those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanna. We did write to government, as I'm sure Cabinet will recall, earlier in the year to ask that they charge, that we can charge the amount that we have to pay in interest and in servicing that loan to the DSG, and they told us no. So I'm going to hand back over to Councillor Cox to sum up, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thanks for all the comments. Much appreciated. Just to respond to Councillor Canavan, you know, there's only so much we can put forward. We don't want to set any hairs racing that that are not going to happen. So you know, there's only so much we can do. However, he does have full access to the Director of Finance, and I think that the Director's door is always open, and I do know he does consult with the Labour Party as well as other parties on financial issues to do with the council. So, and as you've already noted, Leader, that the government have firmly said no to rolling up the interest. What I would say is that if the worst comes to the worst, this, you know, what we're going to have to deal with in the next few weeks could be very brutal in terms of savings we have to make. But we will hopefully know in a few days' time, if not today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Okay, so I just want to note that Overview and Scrutiny Board considered this at their meeting recently. They didn't give us any formal recommendations, but they did support the recommendations in the report. So I just want to thank the board for taking a look at this through a scrutiny lens and for supporting the recommendations. Okay, so Cabinet, can we take a vote on this, please? Can I see all those in agreement with the recommendations? Thank you, that's unanimous. So we will move on now to item number 7, which is the dedicated schools grant high needs expenditure forecast for 25 or 20 and 26. Councillor Richard Burton is going to be presenting and proposing the item. And can I see if there is someone to second this one, please?
Yes, Chair, happy to second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Councillor Burton, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I'm sitting here rather with a feeling of deja vu because we were here this sort of time last year. Now, I say that because I was rather hoping that by now I'd be able to say something a bit different, but it hasn't worked out that way, has it? So I could say exactly the same, really, is what I said last year, just changing some of the numbers. In fact, the recommendations of this paper are also very similar to the recommendations last year. So last year the paper said we were looking to approve a further £16.5 million overspend. This year it's £14.3 million overspend. Last year I said this brings a total funding forecast to 44.5 million, more than the grant made available by government as part of the dedicated schools grant. This year the figure is 71.8 million. Last year, I probably also mentioned that this goes back to the 2014 SEND reforms. That's when EHCPs were introduced and the statutory override established. Remember that the statutory override was designed as a temporary short-term fix to allow the system to settle in. The whole idea was to sort of phase it out once things are settled in. Well, that worked well, didn't it? However, a few things to highlight. Nationally, the local numbers appear the numbers of appeals and appeals go to tribunal. Appeals that go to tribunal has increased by over 400%. The paper uses the term only 150 out of 11,157 cases. The term one is rather unhelpful here. It paints an idea that there's a fight between parents and carers and local authorities. These are all cases that the local authority trying to manage the situation and children wanting suitable schooling provision. There's no winners here, and this system, it costs money and resources that are not being spent on children education. The paper goes deeper into the numbers involved. You can see the movement of pupils from mainstream to state-funded special schools, 60% since 2014-15, and non-maintained special schools, 132% increase in the same time. The only way to improve the situation is to change the direction of flow. We are hoping that the school's white paper will come out by this autumn, but now it's delayed until the spring next year. I do hear people say the new year, but it does definitely say the spring. So when does spring start and stop? Now, I know that some people here do like a little science lesson thrown in every now and again. Astronomical spring starts at the vernal equinox, which is Friday, March the 20th, next year, 26, at approximately 13:45 GMT, and ends the day before the summer solstice, which is Saturday, the 20th of June, 26. So that is when we're expecting the white paper. How much more debt and failed children will have in the meantime, we don't know. The white paper might have set out or might yet set out a new direction, so I hope it does. I'm very looking forward to reading it, actually. I'm also so hoping that it focuses on inclusivity and enables schools to foster the sense of belonging and to help them meet need. I also welcome the government's announcement that they're going to invest in mainstream school SEND places, but taking that money away from the promised free schools is ludicrous. Just to remind everybody, BCP put in 2 bids to fund SEND free schools during the last government. We bid for 2 because we needed 2. We were successful in 1 bid. A bit of celebration, lots of planning, what we could make, the difference, consultation, the promises, more conversations with the DFE and local MPs. Long wait for Christmas, then the next Christmas, and then the next Christmas, and just before, sorry, we changed our mind. So now a larger part of the budget is being spent on pupils permanently excluded from schools, being reintegrated after an exclusion or risk of exclusion. This needs to change. Exclusions of pupils with EHCPs have risen sharply, which demonstrates that their need is not being met. This means that even those pupils with the highest level of statutory support are at increasing risk of exclusion. Pupils without SEND and BCP have a lower exclusion rate than nationally. Now, to be clear, I'm not trying to allocate blame here. The area of SEND partnership has made a vast improvements over the last 2 years, 2 years and 2.5 years, and we are due to outcomes of recent SEND inspection in the new year, and we'll see what is said then. But as always, I want to highlight that there is no blame whatsoever on the children and young people who are entitled to this service. Going back to the recommendations, it's to approve 14.3 million increase in the 25-26 high needs budget. We need to do this to fulfil our statutory requirements, to request the corporate director of children's service to implement the deficit management measures that's in the report, or to put it another way, to try to reduce the increase in spend whilst continuing to improve the outcome for our students. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Are there any councillors who are in the room who would like to say anything on this paper or online? I can't see any indications, so I will go to Cabinet. Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Can I also thank Councillor Burton for his latest update on the DSG's high needs block and the related problems. And as councillors, we are probably all aware of these. But I'm also a trustee of a multi-academy trust, so I see things from the school's perspective. And as a ward councillor, I also hear from concerned and often very upset parents who have to fight this very adversarial system to get the best for their children. We all know the current SEND system's broken, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to the new white paper due spring 2026. Thank you also for the science lesson. And hopefully we might even hear something about the finances any day now. But in the meantime, I can only support the deficit management measures in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm going to start this by doing what's called in the journalism trade as a drop intro. I'm going to make a point that's not really linked to the point I want to make. So some months ago, colleagues will remember that the Muddyford Wood Playgroup came here when they were being threatened with eviction from the Muddyford Wood Community Centre. Roll on several months, and they have just completed their first term brilliantly at the old Highcliffe Day Centre on Lymington Road, which was declared surplus by this council about 2 years ago now, I think, as a day centre, although it's been closed since COVID. They love it there. It's a brilliant facility, and they want to stay there. When I went to see them last week, the playgroup manager mentioned to me that the head teacher of Highcliffe, Mr. Earnshaw, had been around to have a look at the rest of the building for potential SEND provision. In fact, he had 2 visits, himself and someone from the trust. I can't remember the name of the multi-academy trust that he represents, that Highcliffe comes under, but there's 9 schools there. And then I think there have been a couple of visits by the Christchurch Learning Centre, who also were very impressed with the building and see all sorts of potential. The reason I mention that is obviously we are looking for solutions, for satellite solutions to the SEND crisis, and I've not had the opportunity. I spoke to Councillor Burton earlier on. I've not had an opportunity yet to talk to Kathy Hadley about it. But I feel it's one of those things that we really, if we can make that work, it's a brilliant building. It could be an amazing education hub for SEND provision, working alongside or in the same building as the playgroup. So I'm just putting that on the agenda. I'm sure it's already on the agenda, and in fact, I know a school placement officer can't remember her name, did go round with them. So I'm obviously sure that as much is being done as quickly as possible to have a look at this and look at the feasibility of it. But I thought it was worth mentioning because it's could be a great solution for a brilliant education hub. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a couple of comments, partly around the financial side of this, but also about the work that's going on to manage it. I'm pleased that Councillor Burton talked about the vernal equinox, and when in spring we may have an announcement from the government. Vernal equinox is actually my birthday, so I'm hoping that maybe on the 20th of March we will have a positive output from the government as a birthday present for me, but I suspect it will probably be nearer June and the end of spring that we get anything from government rather than the first day of spring. But thank you for reminding me about that. You read this report and the numbers in it, and you could sort of gloss over it, but just to be clear, there's a forecast £183 million deficit as at the 31st of March 2026. That's eye-watering. You know, I've been around local government for 20 years now, and dealt with budgets and finances, and you know that this is just. I think we become a bit blasé about it, but it's really immense, and I think it's really important to remember the sort of impact that this has on the overall council finances, and there was some references made to it in the last paper about the medium-term financial plan. You know, I spoke to a colleague at a neighbouring authority recently, bemoaning the size of the increase in their send deficit and the fact that it meant that they were now getting a lot less interest on their cash balances. And I said, oh, those days are long gone in BCP. You know, losing interest on our cash balances was a few years ago. Having to now take out temporary loans and pay interest on temporary loans to cover this deficit is you know, is mind-boggling to me. But what I like about the report is there's a lot of information in here that it makes it clear that we're not just sort of sitting idly by wringing our hands thinking, oh dear, this deficit is going up and up and up. You know, when are the government going to sort this out? But actually it really details a lot of the positive activity that has been done in terms of increasing the number of places for young people with special educational needs and disabilities. So, but as much as you work and as much as you increase the number of places and increase the activity, the demand is growing inexorably in advance of that. So you could look at this and think, well, why aren't the council doing anything about it? You know, if we weren't doing what we're doing, it would be immensely worse than it is. So I just wanted to sort of make sure that it's clear to anybody sort of listening or watching this that there's an immense amount of work going on to manage this. And if that wasn't going on, these numbers would be higher still. So let's be clear that this is a really difficult situation, but it would be immeasurably more difficult if we weren't actually taking the actions that we're taking at the moment, which are detailed in the papers.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you, Leader. As I think most people know, in a former life, I was once a head teacher of a secondary school. So my ears pricked up a little when Councillor Burton was referring to the high level of exclusions, especially of SEND children, and the financial cost of dealing with those, which is a real concern. What I recall was that as a head teacher of one local authority secondary school within a group, we actually had an arrangement whereby if we excluded a pupil permanently, we negotiated with one of our colleague schools for that pupil to be accepted, at least on an interim basis. And they were given a trial, and if that trial was successful, they continued at that school, and there was no cost to the local authority. In yet another variation of my life, I was once chair of the scrutiny committee for children's services in a London borough. And I remember the officers in that London borough tearing their hair out because of academy schools who took a totally different view of the situation, and they were all too ready to exclude SEND children because SEND children regrettably did not always enhance their examination pass rates, and they therefore were unable to boast, if they kept those children, of the level of examination rates, and they felt that that might be to the detriment of recruitment of pupils from parents, so exclude children who might damage those rates and leave it to the local authority to deal with the implications. I hesitate to suggest that that is taking place here. I have no reason to believe it, but I hope that it isn't. And I also have confidence in our officers to manage the situation as effectively as the government regulations permit. But I think it is unfortunate that government regulations do permit permanent exclusions to take place rather more readily and without oversight in academy schools than ought to be the case. So I sympathise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, one of the impacts, I think the Academy does create a problem, but one of the impacts that obviously is separate is the transport to school. So particularly for some of these children that are having to be placed at distance, it's really disruptive for the families and it's really expensive for us, and that's a separate cost to the SEND costs. I remember, I think it was 1992. We were waiting on the Department for Health, who so in my old day job, we were waiting for the Department of Health to come out with a new strategy, information for health, and they said it would do it in the spring. And the joke became the daffodils were in the deep freeze, because I think it was late autumn that they finally came out with the results. So I'm a little bit concerned about anyone that's anything that's not tied down in terms of how quickly it will happen. But I did find out yesterday about a new SEND school in Portland, £3.8 million that the Dorset Council have earmarked for that, and that was claimed to be part of a multi-billion-pound expansion of SEND provision from the Minister. So I'm really interested in terms of, as you highlighted, there were two we put in for two SEND schools, and thought we'd got one, and I've got none. Whether we should be dusting those off and pushing them back in to say, well, what about us? You know, that would be really interesting. Councillor Martin mentioned the site in Highcliffe. That used to be the old St Mark's primary school. It was my primary school. That's where I went to school, in that building. And it's kind of interesting that the school are now interested back in that site in terms of SEND provision. But that would be really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Herrick.
So this may not come as reassurance to Councillor Burton, but we are still awaiting a road safety strategy that we were told would be released in the autumn. And they have now, I think, 27 hours in which to release that. So hopefully, I'm not sure if it's still the autumn or not. My technical knowledge on when meteorological and the other kind of spring and autumn transitions, I think what we know is that this is symptomatic of an entirely broken system. It's from top to bottom. It's driven by Ofsted and how they approach things. I witnessed my parents dealing with Ofsted in the early 90s, and it quite frankly breaks people, and it continues to do so. But that feeds through into all sorts of implications that we see here today. And one of my stories, and I think I've told it here before, is that there is a child in this area who is going to a school in Romsey at a cost of £70,000 a year, because the secondary school that he wanted to go to wouldn't let him wear joggers as a reasonable adjustment. And if that were the workplace, we would be enforcing really strongly against that. But because of how schools function, we do not, and that is to the detriment of that child's continued education. He was taken away from his friends and sent off to Romsey, to a school that met need, is the technical term, but actually, the ability to have some flex from some of the, and it is an academy, I'm not going to name them, but yeah, it's really disappointing, and is to everyone's detriment, both him and financially to the authority as well, and his friends that kind of that grew up in that ecosystem that schools do create at primary level. So I just wanted to make sure that was back on the record again. So it's one of my most irritating things that I consistently get to talk about, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Councillor Herritt. Okay, so I can't see any other indications to speak on this item. So I'm going to go back to Councillor Burton to sum up, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, quite a few things to pick up on here, aren't they? First off, I'd say, yes, I do visit lots of schools. I was at Twynham School yesterday, and we do have lots of conversations about what's going on in schools. And what I would say is that schools are trying to work with us. I'm not. I said when I introduced this, I don't want to blame things. I understand schools. I spent most of my life in schools. Schools around in BCP, if I say many times, are generally good and outstanding. They do well at what they're measured at, and they do what they're told, and they do it well. It's just that the way that they're measured needs adjusting to help them, to encourage them to do what we also need them to do. Yeah, and I'm Councillor Mortimer. I'm looking forward to coming over and visiting over your area. I'll get my passport and I'll make sure it's up to date, and I'll come over, and I hope there's duty free on the way. Councillor Brown, happy birthday for then. I do so hope you get a good birthday present, and I hope when you get it, you're prepared to share. That's all I can say. We do have, looking at pupils who are excluded from schools in year fair access arrangements within BCP, where conversations have where pupils are excluded and other schools can take them on. But of course, with a lot of these pupils having special needs, the schools then start to decide whether they can meet their needs, and it puts barriers in the way. Exclusions for children, exclusions are something that happens and part of what schools do. We had a discussion about this at Children's ONS last time. In my mind, exclusions can be beneficial, but should only be used for benefit of the child, not benefit of the school. If something is needed to help that child to get a more suitable education for them, and it is something that is in benefit of the child, yes, but my worry is that exclusions, that, and we also talked about internal exclusions and isolations, and how they can work, can be really beneficial to a child, but can also be quite the opposite. There was a school here, we mentioned school transport. The school transport paper went through council last week, so you'll all remember that. And part of that, it just reminded me, because one bit of hope here, and there's a couple of bits of hope here, is that you can tell that around here, both in this room and within our offices, and actually within schools, we do care about children. Now, I was sort of implied that I didn't in council the other day, and I do know one of my colleagues took exception to that on my behalf. But we do, and trying to get a system that works for children while still keeping the council afloat is the thing. Because one thing is for certain, is if we don't keep council afloat, that the people who will end up running the council won't care about children as much as we do. And I always keep that in my mind. And spring, there's primroses in flower in my garden at the moment. And coming back from Twynham School, I saw a bush of camellias, full flower. It says it should be spring, doesn't it? So let's hope spring does arrive early next year. And to the last bit, 21st of December is when winter begins, autumn finishes. Just for your information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Okay, so we will take this item to a vote, please. All those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, so we're going to move on to the corporate performance report. I'm going to be presenting and proposing the report. Is there someone to second, please?
Happy to second, Leader.
Councillor Moore, thank you very much. BCP Council adopted a shared vision for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, and it runs from 2024 to 2028. It's also called, we often call it a corporate strategy, and it sets out our vision, our priorities and our ambitions, as well as those principles which underpin the way in which the council works and how we develop and we deliver our services. The paper has a set of measures for progress to track how we are achieving that vision and whether we are or we aren't. The Council's delivery against its priorities and ambitions can also be monitored on our online digital platform on the website, which has real-time information on those progress measures. So I always try and point out with this paper that even though it comes to us in Cabinet every quarter, it is accessible to the public and to councillors at any time and with the most up-to-date statistics for people to have a look at. So I'm not going to go into specific areas, as I'm sure Cabinet would like to comment on their own areas. However, I was going to add an additional recommendation to this, and it's simply because we have considered Q2 performance. Note the work that continues to expand the data available on the interactive platform dashboard. C, to note the positive activities highlighted in the report. And D, to note the performance exception reports relating to areas of underperformance and task corporate directors to take action to improve performance. And I think that's particularly important because there are quite a few measures in here which are exceedingly good, but there are also a few which have fallen below what we would like our measured output to be. So it's really to note those as well as part of the recommendations to Cabinet. So if I propose that amendment, Councillor Moore, are you happy to accept that one as seconder?
Yeah, happy to support the recommendations with the amendment. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to invite councillors who are outside of Cabinet to speak on this item first. Anyone wishing to speak? I can't see any indications in the room or online. So we'll go over to Cabinet, please. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, there's a great deal of interesting and useful data in this report, including the appendices with information about the positive trends and the more negative trends, which is actually useful because from them we can learn the why, the when and the how, and backed by the data, we can plan how to improve. However, it's also very good to read in the positive exceptions report that this summer in Q2, there were 22.54 million recorded visits to town centres in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, an increase from Q1 of an additional 2 million visitors. So clearly there were a good few reasons behind these figures, including the lovely warm weather, but the backing and support from the 4 business improvement districts, local businesses, large and small, and our events team, all making sure there were plenty of summer activities and good activities taking place. So all this has definitely made a difference. So yeah, I'm happy to support the recommendations with the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. And I think that's a really important measure to mention. Last Christmas, our footfall in Bournemouth Town Centre specifically was 12.5% up. And I'm hoping that this year may even exceed that amount. I'm not sure if anyone has been into the town centre for Christmas this year, but it is absolutely heaving. And it just looks brilliant, and I think it's going to be a really, really good year for us. But if you haven't been, then please do get down sometime before it closes to help boost those footfall figures and make sure our town centres continue to thrive through winter. Okay, any other Cabinet members wanting to speak on this item? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, interesting in terms of the exception reports. There's a positive one around EV charging, which is great. But I was actually in the Ashley Road car park the other evening, and two chargers had their screens smashed out. So having previously lost a lot of the copper cables because people come and thieve them, and I learned from the team that that's only the second occurrence in the whole country of that happening, and they're supposed to be indestructible screens. And someone has taken, I don't know what they've taken to it, but something pretty severe. to actually break through them. So, we have some completely mindless vandalism, which then, if you have an EV, and I'm talking to, and I don't, but, having talked to people who do, you have range anxiety, you turn up to a site to recharge, and you can't charge your car. That's it's really undermining. So that's really unfortunate. Although we've exceeded our target in terms of connections, and there's a lot more that we'd love to do on that. On the negative side, there's one around the percentage of waste diverted from landfill, and again, this kind of comes back to a paper that we're going to come to cover shortly. But maintaining our waste flows is a real challenge on an ongoing basis, and it was a blip amongst suppliers. There's a whole chain of how our waste gets processed and dealt with, of which we're not in control because it's externalised. But we get measured on that, and this is a measure where we didn't do so well, but normal service has been resumed, and we're back on a better path. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Herritt.
So collectively, yourself and Councillor Moore stole my high street thunder somewhat.
Sorry.
By coming up, but correct that beating our target by £2.5 million, £2.5 million people. Which is June through to September, which is Q2. Obviously, that is the peak time for footfall in our conurbation as a tourist destination, and good weather did aid this significantly. It's important, I think, that we credit the weather where it's due, because we do look to make sure that the weather also takes the blame when it's not as good. This is, of course, against the backdrop of generally struggling footfall numbers across UK high streets, as testament to the efforts of local businesses and stakeholders in supporting the town centres. As we're likely to find out later today, our finances are likely to be stretched further, meaning our ability to intervene, aid and support is similarly going to be stretched further. Whilst we do have a little capital available, it is that ongoing revenue support that is so likely to be further diminished. And the ability to do the things that we consistently hear that residents want more of, is that 5 million visits to the Christmas market in Bournemouth town centre last year. I'm hopeful they had 2 closures due to storms over weekends last year, but it does appear to want to rain pretty much every day at the moment. So be interesting to see when those figures come out. Unfortunately, we don't get them live. And the other highlight I wanted to bring out was that the number of businesses in the BCP area has grown to 15,600. That's an ONS number, not ours, and beating our target for December by 3 months. But as ever, when I talk about this item, I talk about our ability to measure it. So the footfall is funded by UK SPF. That is likely to be at further risk as we get into local government settlement. So whilst our team do an amazing job, they are funded by that. And yeah, we hope that the government kind of come through for us on that. But I think Councillor Cox drinking his tea behind you, his face is not as optimistic as I might feel right now.
Thank you, Councillor Herrick. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to share a couple of quotes actually, because Councillor Herrick mentioned the local businesses playing a huge part in the increased footfall and the vibrancy of the town centre. So I'm just going to get a couple of quotes. One from the general manager of the Ivy. So the Ivy opened a year ago, roughly a year ago. So he said, I've now opened 3 Ivies, the others being Winchester and Chichester, over the last 7 years, and Bournemouth has been the most exciting and the most well received. Our guests are still excited to come here, and we're bringing many people in. We're absolutely delighted to be part of the Bournemouth Town Centre community. I've got loads of quotes here, but I'll just give you one more. So this is from the marketing director of Patch, the workspace, which is in Bobby's. And her name's Carly Woodford, and she said, we've made our home in the iconic Bobby's building because we see endless potential in Bournemouth's vibrant community. The response since our launch in Bournemouth has been nothing short of incredible, reaffirming what we already knew. This was the perfect location for our South Coast space. So that's just 2 of the many, numerous businesses that have opened up in Bournemouth in the last 18 months. I think it speaks for itself. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Right, any other requests to speak? Nope. So we will, oh, I should probably sum up briefly. And I think it's really important here in Cabinet that we do address those items that people feel particularly strongly about. And we know that Bournemouth Town Centre in particular gets a very hard rap from the national media, often the tabloids, that want to paint it as something very different to what it actually is. In fact, I was out in Bournemouth Town Centre on both Saturday and Sunday night. It was a genuinely joyful atmosphere, really, really busy. And I do think that residents and sometimes, councillors, stakeholders, all sorts should go and visit it and see for themselves that it is a really thriving place to be. And just on the wider areas of this report. So I think that this could be a basis for some of the areas of scrutiny. I know that Cabinet and councillors have been asked for areas of scrutiny. So perhaps scrutiny committees and chairs could look at some of these metrics and see whether there are any that you think would like to be looked at in a bit more detail. I'm sure portfolio holders would be very happy to attend scrutiny and talk about them a little bit further if there is an appetite for that from those committees. Okay, so can I take a vote on this one, please? So we have A, B and C recommended as set out in the report, and then D, which adds on, I would just read it again, note the performance exception reports relating to areas of underperformance and task corporate directors to take action to improve performance. Can I see all those councillors in favour of those recommendations? Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, so we're going to move on to agenda item 9, which is the waste strategy for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council 26 to 36. This will be presented by Councillor Hadley, who will also propose it. Can I see if there's someone to second it, please?
So I'm quite happy to second that, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. So we'll hear from Councillor Hadley and then we'll go to councillors in the room. So Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. So this paper outlines the next 10 years, really, in terms of managing waste. We are at a position where we will need to retender our contracts quite shortly, and that's actually a really unfortunate time to be doing it because of all changes to the waste streams under the what's called the simpler recycling, but I'm not sure it really is. But part of that is the introduction of food waste in Poole and for flats in Bournemouth and for commercial premises, and also the changes to the mix in terms of the recycling of materials, considering separating cardboard and the opportunities for returning bottles and plastic to be recycled separately. With a deposit scheme. That will have quite significant changes to the value that we get for the different streams of waste, and I referred to it under Councillor Cox's budgetary papers because these are big numbers. It's big volumes of waste. We handle about 800,000 tonnes of waste a year, and again, the government's ambition is that we recycle 65% of waste by 2035. We currently recycle about 43.9% of our waste, and we have within our recycling bins about a 19% contamination rate. So that's where people are putting the wrong things into their recycling bins, and in some cases we reject that bin, and otherwise, that has an impact again on the value that we can get from that recycled. We also know that in the residual waste bin, half of what's in there shouldn't be in there, or could be in the recycling bin or in the food waste bin. And again, that's issues that we will have to work on with residents around the conurbation. We are exploring whether there are possibilities that we could extend some of our existing contracts beyond 2027. The reason it's so unfortunate timing is because every authority in the country is having to look at changing their waste at the same time. So for suppliers, that's a bonanza in terms of potentially increasing the costs. But there are also costs of changing costs for them that make it a difficult time. I think that's me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. So I am going to invite Councillor Rigby from Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee to present the recommendations. And those recommendations have also been published in advance of the meeting. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, so this came to our last Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny, and we had a really good debate around this whole topic, actually. And that's led to us giving 3 recommendations. The first one is around the removal of the curbside battery waste collection, which is currently policy, but the new waste strategy is looking to put that and removing the separate curbside collection of batteries. But to add in your paper, you've got 3 recommendations. Recommendation C is to add another point in that, so it would be C2, and that would be and to develop a convenient battery recycling scheme with local businesses to create more easily accessible drop-off points. And the reason behind adding this to the recommendations is it was noted that there's not a huge amount of battery collection points around the conurbation. Most of them exist in supermarkets and people can drop them off. They're not hugely well advertised, and a lot of people end up with stacks of batteries in a drawer somewhere, like myself. And also the amount of vapes which now have batteries in, and despite the government getting rid of disposable vapes, they're still in their very nature quite disposable despite them being rechargeable. So working with pubs, restaurants, places where people will be, and it's easy to just go, oh, I'm finished with this now and get rid of it. We thought that'd be a really good way of reducing the amount of batteries going into general waste. It's just where we noted that the reasons that there have been fires on the waste collection trucks and in the depots as well, and I think there was another one in Dorset recently as well, so they are common around the country. So trying to reduce that, we feel like expanding and working to put battery recycling in the most convenient places is the right way to do it. The other 2 recommendations we have is to add into the waste strategy itself rather than in the recommendations, and if it's all right with you, I'll just read them out so that people can hear them. So this is paragraph 5.1 of Appendix 1, and that would read that would be amending it to include and incineration. So an entire paragraph would read tendering waste disposal contracts that embed the waste hierarchy and minimise the use of landfill and incineration. So again, that was just around making those the final places that waste go to, so improving the circular economy, reducing waste and continuing that, and just highlighting that incineration is also in the same way treated as landfill. And then the second one is to go into paragraph 5.3, and that's to add in, whilst also considering the carbon footprint of the type of disposal. So the full paragraph would read, prioritising waste site proximity where possible, so waste travels only as far as it needs to and reduces the significant carbon impact of transporting waste, while also considering the carbon footprint of the type of disposal. So just to expand on that a little bit further. Just to add in, we didn't have any recommendations come out of it, but we noted that the waste strategy is quite open and it gives the ability for any future technologies to be adopted into the waste strategy as it's written, which we appreciated. And the other thing was the circular economy element was quite small. And we had a discussion around that. We didn't come up with a recommendation for it, but we noted that it could be added to and expanded to through future motions or cabinet policy changes and positions, which we'd welcome looking at in the future. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. I'm going to go back to Councillor Hadley to respond.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, so if I start with the recycling batteries, I didn't actually cover that in my summary, but it's in the paper, and it's actually a separate recommendation. It doesn't arise directly out the strategy. It's more about an operational issue that currently is not very well used, and it does create create issues. The discussion, obviously, I came to ONS to hear the debate, and the concern was particularly about people who are housebound or people who are buying stuff online, who are not going into shops. The team are concerned about the cost and complexity of setting up additional means to collect from extra businesses. Under the Waste, Batteries and Accumulator Regulations Act regulations of 2009, any shop that sells batteries over a de minimis level, which is 32 kilograms of batteries per year by weight, also have to take them back for recycling. So they have to have a means for people to recycle. So a lot more shops perhaps than people realise probably have them. Anyone can also apply for a battery collection box from organisations like Valpacks, who provide them for free. So as someone who's who does use a lot of battery appliances, potentially housebound or otherwise not able to get to shops, could do that. So I think what we'd be keen to do is to signpost available organisations on our website by other means, because they already exist around the place. And again, there's a website which you can just say, how do I recycle X, and it will tell you. You put in your postcode, and it will tell you where the local places are for that. You mentioned fires there have been 5 fires on lorries in recent times, and they have to eject the load and then get the fire brigade to put it out, because obviously they want to safeguard the lorry first. Those are nearly always, where they can determine the cause, they nearly always are batteries of some description. We have also had 2 fires at the waste transfer stations, and there was a really serious one at the Herne transfer station, which has meant it's been closed for some time. That has impacted particularly the rounds in Christchurch and Highcliffe, and I've been having a lot of complaints about recycling in those areas. It's because the lorries are having to go to empty their wagon at Poole, so it's extended their working patterns rather than being able to empty at Herne and go back on the streets again. They're having to do that, so that has been actually one of the significant causes of delays to our recycling. I am told we've got an interim solution. Effectively, the roof and the electrics have all been impacted by the fire, but they have come up with a temporary solution. We've got to keep the recyclates dry. It's part of keeping the value of them, but we have got a solution to that. So I think we can accept that we will signpost people to available schemes to create more easily accessible drop-off points, including home collection, is what I prefer to accept from that recommendation from ONS. On the second and third recommendations, the national reforms contain a waste hierarchy which will drive us to push up our recycling rates. Energy from waste sits just above landfill as the bottom 2 preferences. In dealing with our waste streams, we are constrained by the available capacity, and I appreciate the concerns arose in part about the proposals for the energy from waste facility at Merley, as there are concerns in Dorset about the planned Portland one, and in Wiltshire about the planned one at Westbury. These are all planned by commercial entities. Whether our waste goes to them is separate from whether they get built. The ambition to reduce waste road miles to meet our carbon reduction commitments is also important, but it relies on having local facilities. So there's a tension between those 2 recommendations from ONS. But in practice, we will have to try and balance those 2. We're not in direct control of where our waste streams go, as this is in the hands of the receiving organisations, but we will certainly include both those considerations in our tendering priorities. So I'm happy to accept those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Can I just check that the seconder is happy with those as well?
Yes, Leader, I'm quite happy with those.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Okay, so I'm going to see if any other councillors want to speak on this. Any on Cabinet wishing to? Councillor Herrick?
So it's quite unusual to be contacted by a resident about a Cabinet paper directly. I will admit often the noise comes from the various stakeholders and things like that, but he raised a concern about the removal of batteries, that it was a retrograde step in his opinion, and asked for the campaign that was considered as part of option 2, but that obviously was taken on board by the Environment and Place debate, the chair and the portfolio holder. So I thought it important that I addressed that here for my resident, but also expressed, I think, the justification as to why we're looking to transition that seems fairly strong. I think preventing those fires and the risk to obviously building and life as well that's posed by them is really important, and a campaign to make sure that people are appropriately signposted and get them picked up is that. And I would encourage communities that could take that on. I think just I would ask one of our Win on Waste people, do they help deal with batteries as well? Is that something that is their ability to do, or do they not touch that?
No.
Sorry, I'm just throwing a grenade in there for you to answer.
Thank you, Councillor Hera. And my view is that if you can put it in the bin at the supermarket, then I'm not going to collect it at Win and Waste because it's at a supermarket. Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I can clear that up as part of what I say, Councillor Howard. Yeah, so yeah, a few things that I picked up from this paper. I mean, first off, going back to when I was young, we used to call them dustbins, didn't we? And they were called dustbins for a reason, because they were full of dust. Because that's what basically the main thing that you put it was ash from the fire and sweepings. You know, the lorry used to come, somebody used to pick it up, put it on their shoulder and walk down your drive with it, because that was the amount of waste that we used to produce. Sorry. What we put in our refuge now is increased an order of magnitude to what we used to do, and it's much more complex. You know, back then we also, because you know, we talk about reusing and recycling, people get that mixed up quite a lot as well. We used to reuse things a lot because we used to have returnable milk bottles. We used to have the pop man used to come and deliver Corona. I'm allowed to say that in Canada, and glass bottles, and take. You know, we didn't used to recycle very much because most stuff got reused. So what we do now is actually quite complex, and we expect our systems to deal with a really complex mixture of waste. I picked up residual waste is processed through mechanical biological treatment and energy from waste, and we currently have no local energy from waste facilities and only one landfill site in our area. Now, yes, Bearwood and Merley, it was a hot topic, and I know this isn't finished now because there's been an appeal with the planning application for the incinerator, the energy from waste plant. One thing is that, you know, I know residents really don't want it, although we've got to do something with the waste, and at the moment we're sending it elsewhere. The only way to square that circle is actually to produce less waste, and the waste we produce to get recycled better, and the value extracted from it. Looking at the number of people who did the survey, there was actually quite a lot, but actually, no, it wasn't really, was it? Only 312 people actually completed the survey. Of 410,000 residents, 312, and every one of the residents, you know, this is a survey that applies to everybody, doesn't it? Because every resident that we have will produce rubbish and will put rubbish in the bin. And they seem to be in two camps: those people who are really thinking about it, and those people who are basically saying, as long as it doesn't cost us more money or it gets more complicated, I want it outside, out of mind, and we can't continue like that. Just to compare, the MVV planning application had 469 objections. So more people objected to a planning application for an energy waste plant than filled in the survey that we had. Yes, I am a trustee of Win on Waste. It's not a pecuniary interest, so I didn't mention it, and I do understand quite a lot. I do get people coming into my collections, often bringing cells and batteries in. I'll come back to that in a minute. Saying, "Do you take these?" No, we don't, because Win on Waste, the whole idea of it is actually using a waste stream to raise money for local charities. We have tried in the past to get involved in removing waste from waste streams and costing us money, but that's not what we do. Blister packs, tablets are one thing, because a lot of residents don't understand that blister packs aren't made of aluminium and therefore can't be aluminium foil, and therefore it's what we call wish cycling. And of course we do an awful lot of that, don't we? I see it on Win and Waste when people come in and they think, I can do something with this, and you have to say no, but you must be able to. A lot of our residents put stuff in their recycling expecting it to be recycled, but actually it can't, and that's part of the problem as well, isn't it? Curbside cell, battery and accumulators, just to, sorry, science lesson again. Batteries are two or more cells joined together. Most of the things that we actually have are actually cells. Accumulator is a rechargeable cell or battery. We have a lot of those these days. We used to have You know, again, going back to the days we used to buy cells and batteries, you used to throw those away, you try cutting them in half and nothing would happen. These days, we have so many of them, and most of them are rechargeable accumulators. The difference is that if you short circuit them, they can deliver a huge current, and that huge current produces a lot of heat, and that's why we end up with the fires. Yeah, we did have one in just over the border in Wimborne a couple of weeks ago. The bin lorry had to empty its contents out on the street before the fire service arrived, and that's just over the border. I do worry about us saying we're not going to do it anymore, but I can, on the curbside, but I can see the reason why. But added to that, of course, a lot of the other stuff that we have cells, batteries, and accumulators in them. A lot of electrical equipment that we have, people don't go, oh, they're just going to throw that away, and you get the same. And therefore, we've got to get people to understand the dangers involved there. I think that's all. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Councillor Moore?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Follow that. Okay. Well, I did just want to say that I'm going to be really pleased when Poole gets its own food waste service, because this is something we've wanted in Poole for a very long time, and something else that should be up and running next spring. So I also wanted to mention the new to you shop in Poole Cabot Lane, because I think it's amazing, and it's something of an Aladdin's cave, and I'd be very happy to see that replicated in Bournemouth and Christchurch as well. What I really wanted to major on was that, as you know, I organise these regular community litter picks, usually with my local scouts. And we don't just pick up litter, we also tend to clear up small fly tipping sites, the sort of thing people throw over their fence into the woods or the open space behind them. But I must just mention that one site we pick is near the road where the Poole Recycling Centre is sited. And this area is really prone to fly tipping, despite the proximity of the centre. And in some cases, they must have driven past it in order to dump their waste. So personally, I would support stronger legislation where this type of fly tipping is concerned. And I also think it would be helpful for more comms on what can be disposed of at the recycling centre for free. As one excuse you get, usually on social media, is if the council didn't charge, there would be less fly tipping. Now, I do appreciate that the information is actually really, really clear on the website, but it somehow hasn't got through to a lot of residents. And I think that perhaps some sort of positive comms campaign might be helpful in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Can't see any other indications. So, Councillor Brown, go on then.
Thank you, Chair. I was partly prompted by my colleague mentioning recycling Corona bottles back in the 1970s, which reminded me that I used to have a T-shirt that said I've passed the Corona physical. People can remember that far back. Councillor Moore stole my thunder a bit, talking about the food waste coming in Poole, and I think it's been long awaited by residents of Poole. So, and I don't think too many people are that aware of it actually. So I think it's important to get the message out that from April next year, Poole residents will be able to have food waste bins and have their food waste collected, as well as in Bournemouth. I think it's been expanded to flats in Bournemouth as well, the food waste collection. So I think that's a really important improvements in our services and for what people get for the council tax they pay. So I think those are really important points to make. I agree with colleagues about the sort of changes to battery recycling. To be honest, not a lot of people I think were aware that you could do it with the sort of regular recycling collection. And I was really depressed when one of the local TV channels had a news item all about fires on bin trucks and in waste depots, etc. And then they cut back to the studio and the presenter said, so just remember to put your batteries in your recycling, and just undid all of that good work about getting the message out there. But yeah, I think it's a really important thing that people do realise, because I speak to friends and colleagues and neighbours who, you think are fairly clued up, but when I see the things they put in their waste and that they don't realise they shouldn't put batteries in their waste, and they go to put stuff in their waste, and I point out there's the little things on the back of the packets that tell you what can be recycled and what has to go to the supermarket and what you can and can't put in. And I think there's just so many people that don't look at those things and doesn't cross their mind. So I think education and communication is really important around this to make sure that, you know, everything that all the opportunities we're providing for people to sort of do the right thing with their waste, that people are aware of that and actually are sort of changing their behaviours as a result of that. Yeah, I think those are the only things to mention.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hadley, do you want to sum up, please?
Crikey, yeah, lots there. So I think one of the key things with the fires in the lorries is it is when people are putting stuff into their recycling, it's actually when it's going in the back and it's getting crushed. So when they've been collecting it, the batteries from a bag sitting on top of the bin, that's not the problem. The problem is actually people just stuffing it into the normal waste, and the crusher is trying to compact the whole load, and in doing so it breaks the accumulator or cells or batteries, but probably accumulator, and creates a short circuit. So that's the real challenge, and I think the education piece, which several colleagues have mentioned, is really important. It has been a casualty, unfortunately, of cuts to service. Is one of the areas that it's the bit that we've got to keep emptying the bins. We haven't got to keep telling people what to do, and so unfortunately it's gone by the wayside. But I think as part of introducing food waste to pool and part of trying to reinforce habits in Bournemouth and Christchurch, that will be a key part of the messaging. Will be about what needs to go in what, and as has been referred to, there's a lot of effort goes into what goes online. But that doesn't cover it. Sometimes it needs to be a physical leaflet for people to really read it, stick it on the fridge, and refer back to it. But as Councillor Brown mentioned, actually, by legislation, probably a lot of it is actually EU legislation. The packaging very often will tell you if it's not supposed to go in the bin, and it needs people to look. In terms of the Councillor Burton's recollection, I'm just thinking about rose-coloured glasses there. Yes, things used to be very different, and interesting. There's a film online called Story of Stuff, which talks about how manufacturers have sort of been on a mission to reduce their costs by passing the responsibility down the line. So moving away from the returned bottles, others than Corona existed. Beer bottles used to be recycled as well, returned as well. The manufacturers sort of pass that responsibility on to us, and part of the simpler recycling reforms is to try and push back against that, to make it an incentive for the suppliers, the producers of the products, to reduce their packaging, to think about the cost of their packaging by hitting their own pockets. And so that's why we've got that tax windfall, why you will see changes to packaging, because the manufacturers are now looking at that a bit closer because it's costing them money, and therefore changing, and that will impact the waste stream, in addition to the idea that some of them could be recycled. And I was on Malta not so long ago, and there was a machine that was able to read the barcode, and from the barcode it knew what the product was, it knew what the packaging was, and it knew which of its compartments to stick it in, and it gave you a small amount of money on the basis. So these things exist, of course. So when I brought that back, they said, "Well, that costs too much money to do." But there's an issue about how we achieve that. It is sad that I think actually the reflection on a lot of our surveys do have very few people respond, and they're probably the people who are most informed because they're actually passionate about that topic, and therefore they will respond. How do we get to everyone? Because this is a universal service, is a really important issue. Wish cycling was mentioned, and again that happens in the recycling bin. I find myself nearly doing it myself and then thinking, oh, I ought to know which bin this goes in, and going back and having a look. But again, for a lot of people, they won't do that. They'll just chuck it in whichever bin they think, and that does create a problem for us down the line. The new to you at Cabot Lane, I'd love to see us extend that. I think operationally it's going to be very difficult to replicate. I think they're more looking, in any case, we've got to potentially move out the Cabot Lane site before too long, so it will be around perhaps having a slightly more central facility, but I wouldn't want it to move too far away from where it is because it's very popular there. But being able to open more than one day a week would be great, and being able to serve people in Bournemouth and Christchurch better. And I have had quite a lot of complaints as we took on the Wilverley Road tip in Christchurch. We stopped people being able to take stuff away from that facility, and they kind of go, well, I'm not trucking over to Poole, and I understand that. But it is about the practicalities running. That's run mostly on volunteers. There's one paid member of staff, and the rest of them are volunteers, and so that's really important. And yes, the how do we reduce the need for the waste in the first place. And again, that's a tension in terms of the work, but it costs us money net in terms of even if we recycle stuff, we don't get as much as it costs us to collect it. So reduction is an important way to save money as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Okay, so I just want to confirm our thanks to Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee and the work that they did looking at this. We are going as a Cabinet to accept the amendments to paragraph 5 of Appendix 1. However, with the additional small 2 on C, of the recommendations, instead we'll have to signpost to battery recycling schemes. And I agree, I think when we do get to the, in the run up to the reforms to our waste collection, then we need to be careful to include that as part of it so that residents are made aware that they won't be able to put their batteries out anymore and where they can go instead. Okay, can I see all those in favour of those recommendations? Thank you, that's unanimous. So we've gone over 2 hours, but we only have one paper left. So I was going to suggest we do that paper. So it's agenda item 12, which is the designation of the high street rental auctions for Bournemouth Town Centre. Councillor Herritt is going to be proposing this one. Is there someone to second, please?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Over to you, Councillor Herritt.
Thank you, Leader. So this is the designation of Bournemouth Town Centre as a high street rental auction area. This is a piece of legislation brought in under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act in 2023 and one that BCP Council is part of an early adopter scheme for. High street rental auctions have been introduced to help councils bring long-term vacant high street properties back into use, and this move supports the council's commitments to the reimagination of high street, driving footfall back into town centres. Council's financial position is a serious inhibitor in our ability to lend as much support to the town and district centres as we would like, but what we can do is utilise pieces of legislation like this to enable businesses, charities and other organisations to get into those underused units that we see. I'm sure every member can think of a unit in just Bournemouth Town Centre that they would like to see back in use that's been vacant for a long time, and on a wider basis in other town centres and district centres around the conurbation. This paper asks us to approve the designation of the HSRA area for Bournemouth Town Centre, which does allow us to move onwards, but we are further asking that future designations are delegated to the Chief Operations Officer in consultation with the portfolio holder. The rest of the process will remain the same, but it does mean that we wouldn't have to go back into the full Cabinet process to designate spaces in the future. They will also enable us to consider much more quickly, and as I'm sure everyone has thought of around this table and on a wider member basis, they would like to see their area included as potential in the future. Back to this particular designation, we recently held a 28-day public consultation in line with the legislation running from July 15th to August the 12th. There wasn't a huge amount of respondents, but 75% of those who did respond approved the proposed designated area, showing strong local support and something that people would like to see. When we brought this to Cabinet, it was noted that Bournemouth was a priority for this scheme due to the other town centres in our area being in a better position and having different circumstances, particularly those with large shopping centres or large kind of managed centres, should I say. They don't fall under the legislation, so the powers there are much more limited and don't count towards the vacancy rate. That obviously does remain the case, but I should point out the total vacancy rate for Bournemouth is currently 20%, which is bang on the national average. The vacancy register is funded by government grant, and we can access up to £5,223 per auction for costs. There is obviously some council contribution in terms of officer time. That is part of their function to do a lot of this engagement work anyway. Of course, the public might expect really quick results. However, as with so much in local government, not quite as simple as that. This is another step on the journey to get those units let on a longer term basis. The next step is to complete a vacancy register to identify eligible properties, further landlord engagement, preparatory work for any first auctions that do take place. It's important that we view the auctions as an option of last resort, should informal engagement not succeed. landlords and agents I've spoken with say they don't, and most agents and landlords are keen to let their properties, but we do know that there are some landlords out there who sit on properties, keep the rental value high so they can leverage debt against it. This engagement process that we will be going through is part of why that's so important. When local authorities have moved to the designation phase around the country, though, they have already seen an improvement in their vacancy rates. So just taking this step can often prove successful. It doesn't give us a magic bullet to solve all of the high street's issues, but it does give us another tool to help breathe new life into our town centres and district centres, hopefully in the future, supporting local businesses and other uses for high street units that have remained empty for too long.
Thank you, Councillor Herritz. Any councillors wishing to speak on this? Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Leader. It's great to see this administration pushing forward Labour government policy. So that's a pleasure to see. I just wanted to press you a bit on the second recommendation about other areas. Absolutely support the need to do this in Bournemouth Town Centre. And, you know, comments were made earlier on about there are some good stories out there to say about Bournemouth Town Centre. Perhaps we don't collectively say enough about them. Councillor Brown said talked about his birthday earlier. It was my birthday last week. And my wife, in a moment of rash generosity, took me to the Ivy. It was really busy down there, so it was great to see how well it was doing. But I want to press you on the second recommendation because I'm just a bit concerned about speed, because I'm, you know, would like to push that speed up a fraction, more than a fraction actually, if that's possible. My issue here is the inference in the paper is that we'll do this as a kind of pilot. We'll do Bournemouth Town Centre as a pilot. Great to see the map, by the way, because the map covers quite a big area. That's great. But what I wouldn't want to see is say, right, let's do this as a pilot. Let's wait and see. Let's see how it goes, and then in 12 months' time, we'll take some kind of assessment about how it's gone and where we can do it next. I think that's way too slow. So this is my pitch for Boscombe, which you'll probably not be surprised to hear. But could we do it for Boscombe, and could we do it quite quickly? Because I think this thing will help. I generally do think this is an initiative that will help regenerate areas and persuade some of the more recalcitrant landlords that we do have that actually this is a good thing and that what we're trying to do is improve the area for us all. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Right, anyone on Cabinet wishing to speak on this? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. I should first declare a non-pecuniary interest because I'm a director of Pool Bid on your behalf. But certainly in response partly to Councillor Canavan, in Pool, the bid have been doing a lot of work in trying to look at vacant properties and I think, you know, they're possibly in a slightly different place in terms of Bournemouth, but I absolutely accept that Boscombe and other areas perhaps need some assistance. But I just thought it was worth, you know, there are other actors in this, and certainly in Pool, I think it's something that it's not perfect, but it seems that the vacancies are lower. It would be really useful actually look at our district centres and actually understand, you know, what the vacancy numbers as well as rates, because rates in smaller shopping areas is probably less relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yeah, following on from Councillor Hadley. I just wanted to point out that despite the heading in this report being about Bournemouth, it is actually just the pilot scheme, if you like, and then this legislation can be rolled out to any town or district centre across BCP which meets the criteria. And obviously, as I live in Poole and represent a Poole ward, I would be very happy for Poole Town Centre to have its own designated HSRA area. So yeah, very happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. I've got to admit that I feel slightly conflicted. I'm supporting the recommendation, but I feel both excited at the prospect of this succeeding and of our town centres improving, Bournemouth in particular. But I also feel slightly apprehensive because I look at the complexity of the flow chart that indicates the route through and the various stages at which businesses might be able to prevaricate or appeal or take other actions. And I anticipate that it will take up quite a demand on our resources to see this through and to actually achieve real improvement over a number of vacant premises. But nevertheless, I do totally welcome it. And I think actually Councillor Canavan may not be fully accurate in what he said. I seem to recall that this was an initiative from the previous government, which I'm delighted that the current government has continued to support. But I may be wrong in that. I'm pretty sure that was the case. I do totally support Councillor Canavan's comments in terms of Boscombe, and I think the stage at which we could extend to Boscombe, that would be extremely beneficial to that town centre. The other things that I would comment on are other steps that the government might take in order to improve the situation for local businesses. One is in terms of ownership of properties, where that can frequently be confusing, and I know from council officers who have attempted to establish ownership of some of the properties in Bournemouth that finding who is actually ultimately owning and responsible with shells within shells can be incredibly difficult, and I think the government needs to sort out that nightmare to enable councillors to more readily identify those who are responsible. The other thing that occurs to me is I think it would be nice if the current arrangements in certain parts of the country for businesses to have reductions in rates because of designations of particular areas, if that could be extended and all local authorities could have the ability to designate areas in particular high streets for business rate reductions in order to enable small businesses to flourish. And the last consideration is that government might wish to review the change in business rates that was enacted through the budget, which is causing some of our businesses real difficulties. And that is exemplified in my own ward in West Southbourne. And it could well be that if the government were to review that and improve the situation for businesses, then all of our MPs would be welcome in all of our premises. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I do welcome this, and just to go back a couple of stages, that I hear a lot of people sort of criticising the council for the state of our high streets and town centres. But it's not, there's certain levers the council can pull, certain things that we can do to support our sort of retail businesses, our hospitality, high streets and town centres, but we can't wave a magic wand. In Bournemouth town centre, Marks and Spencer's major store in Bournemouth closed in 2018, and then with the loss of Debenhams, Beals and House of Fraser sort of post-pandemic around 2021, a town centre doesn't recover from that overnight and suddenly new people move in. It will take years to recover from those sorts of key anchor stores disappearing from the town centre, and the town centre sort of reimagining what it offers. And I'm quite proud of how this administration, this council sort of has done what it can do. We had the Town Centre Improvement Fund that we approved a couple of years ago, and that invested hundreds of thousands of pounds in things within Poole, Bournemouth and Christchurch town centres. And I saw masses of public applause for the subway mural down in Poole between the Dolphin Centre and the Lighthouse. There's a lot of positivity about the high street maintenance vehicle in Poole as well, and things about the new lighting down the high street. Those were all funded from our Town Centre Improvement Fund, working with the bids, and the bids have got a really key part to play in this, and they're a really sort of valuable partner. But the public, I think the council often doesn't get much credit for the stuff it is actually doing and the stuff it is actually funding and doing for our town centres. The public love taking pictures of the mural and sharing it on social media without even realising that, you know, we funded that and this cabinet approved that and delivered that with the support of the bid. So I think we've been doing a lot of what we can do, partly putting in funding, and this is another example of what we can do to support Bournemouth Town Centre, particularly in this case, but, you know, hopefully, if necessary, sort of roll it out elsewhere. And I'm quite positive about, you know, the number of new independent businesses and national chains coming into both Bournemouth Town Centre and Poole and elsewhere. You know, Winton High Street's got 2 major units that are currently sort of reopening in Winton with B&M and with the Trove store taking over an empty unit. So there's reasons to be positive, but I do get, I even had a friend said to me just last week, said, oh, I haven't been down to Poole for years, quite a lot of the shops are closing. You think, because you haven't been down there for years, you know, they don't just sit there waiting. It's money through the till that keeps these places going. And people don't seem to sort of link their own personal behaviour to the consequences. They like to moan about the consequences, but don't realise that's partly as a result of their own changes in behaviour. And not going and putting money through the tills on those high streets. And I've said several times, I'm always quite proud that I do about 90% of my Christmas shopping on Poole High Street and in the Dolphin Centre, and I have done again this year. I was there on Saturday, spent far too much in the cafes, restaurants and shops in Poole. But if people don't do that, then, you know, these places will wither and die. And so, yeah, it's down to public behaviour. It's down to the work of the bids, it's down to the local authority, it's down to Dorset Police, it's down to lots of different people. But I'm really pleased that as an authority that we are stepping up to the mark and doing what we can do in terms of funding stuff, in terms of doing this. So yeah, I'm very happy to support this, very pleased to hear comments about, you know, could it be rolled out in other areas in Boscombe or, you know, potentially in Poole or Winton or wherever to support our high streets. But let's get this going and then see where we can take it. So.
Thank you, Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you, Lee. I mean, just following on from what my colleague said there, I mean, I remember back when there were 2 Marks and Spencers in Bournemouth, or one at either side of the town. You know, we're never going to go back to those days. High streets have changed beyond recognition. But of course, this sort of work is actually helping change the high street into something new that people can visit. But one thing which is totally for certain, that, you know, as a community, we need to visit the high street. We need to go there for experiences. We need to do some shopping there, and we need to do some buying some food and doing other things. But and telling people how good it is. I'm coming down to Bournemouth twice the next 2 days. I'm visiting with some children from BCP that skate rink tonight. Hopefully it's not going to rain too hard. I'm going to the Russell Coates tomorrow, and we're going to, hopefully, if it's not raining, walk through the Wonderland while we're there. And I know it's going to feel good and be a good place. And I'll try to make people know that. One thing is for certain is people saying that Bournemouth isn't a nice place isn't going to help Bournemouth become a nice place, because it is. And putting people off coming to the town centre is really not helping our communities.
Thank you. I can't see any other hands raised on that. I was just going to add a couple more thoughts around our district shopping centres, because I'm very lucky in my where my ward is to represent Ashley Road, which is the 2nd largest shopping district in Poole. I often think it's almost the Boscombe equivalent, but it offers a huge array of shops. And in fact, I popped in on Saturday to a brand new coffee shop that had just opened and a tailor next door. And it's really good to see some of these districts actually being able to pull in businesses that maybe are not so attracted to the kind of unit that's available within the town centre. And what I think the HSRA is going to be really good at is actually providing a bit of a mixture of units, of rents, of availability. I also went to Trove on Saturday as well in Winton, and it was brilliant, you know, seeing all those independent traders in different from different providing very different things, and it was fabulous just to look around, and I did end up buying some Christmas presents, but it is really important that we support our local high streets, particularly at this time of year, and also support our town centres too, and going into the town centre, making the most of it. So you've just reminded me, Councillor Burton, that I need to get ice skating into my diary at some point over Christmas. Okay, Councillor Herrick, do you want to sum up, please?
Yes, happily. So thank you to everyone with their thoughts. I think what is very clear is that high streets and district centres remain very high on the agenda for every councillor as we get around their views. Councillor Canavan does raise a valid point about the speed at which this could progress, but Councillor Hannah also immediately flagged that the reason that this is quite slow is because it is quite complex. It's more complex than we would like. I'm more than happy to find a way to accelerate where we can, but it can be resource heavy. And as soon as we've found our way through the first one, I don't think we'll be resting on our laurels as to how we can implement that in the future. Obviously, as we've already spoken about, the state of future of local authority finances awaits us at 3 o'clock this afternoon, apparently. So we'll find out more at that point. We do have the ability to lower some business rates, but that has to be equitable in policy terms. And as an authority with 3 town centres and several booming district centres, particularly in Broadstone, Westbourne and Southbourne, means that and combined with the financial position we were left in, means we have to take we're not able to take the long-term view on business rates that we perhaps would be able to with deeper pockets and reserves. We also see in strategic mayoral authorities the ability to retain a large proportion of business rates and take that wider view. Again, we await as an area to make it up the government priority list. I believe Wessex leaders did write again last week to government to say that we are ready and waiting, and I'm sure we would look interestingly on that, look favourably on that were we to be given that ability. Furthermore, I was listening to Parliament yesterday as I was working, as all normal local politicians must, but there was a 10-minute rule bill introduced that went through to its second reading about enabling local authorities to allocate temporary use in vacant units. I think it's really interesting to see where that might end up, and it might end up rolled into the HSRA legislation. For me at this point, it's really kind of good to be able to crack on. We're not waiting. We are still working on vacancy register as we speak, because we knew that the Bournemouth as a concept was going to go in. This is just designating the final map area. And thank you for your support.
Thank you, Councillor Herrick. Okay, so we will take this item to a vote. Can I see that Cabinet, who on Cabinet agrees with the recommendations as set out in the paper? Thank you. That's unanimous. So we move on to agenda item 13, which is urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with the Constitution. Chief Executive, do you have anything to report, please?
I have no urgent decisions to report.
Thank you, Aidan. And agenda item 14, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. I can advise that the latest version has been published. It's available on the Council website. It's also included on this agenda. So that concludes our business for today. Thank you to all those who have contributed. The next Cabinet meeting, of course, is in the new year on Wednesday, the 14th of January. I'd just like to take this opportunity to wish you all a very happy Christmas and New Year. And that goes to councillors, Cabinet members, members of the public, officers, Chief Exec, and anyone else who might be listening in. So I'll now formally close the meeting.